There you go.
What in the heck is
So
relay?
I'll just wait for his
Array.
oath tomorrow. I'll have him come
Let
in.
me just ask him if Ed said he's all set.
All right.
Because I think that was the only thing we had.
Oh.
All right, I'm gonna turn those mics on, I guess, down there. Do you want both microphones on?
Yeah. And then they go. Is he in there?
No, Vicky said she's all set.
So let me go.
You just gotta make sure that they go up to the mic to talk. Is it
I
working?
tell them. Yeah,
Okay.
if they don't sound not
Do you
on
need
the
a
record.
battery in your mouse?
No, I looked at it, but I got a battery. I brought
Try
all
it.
kinds of batteries just in case.
Is the what you call it in there?
Oh, that's I think what I'm missing. That's why I didn't
USB?
try it. Is it?
I don't think it's
It
in
might
there.
not be.
Yeah, I
So
don't
that's
think
why
it's in there.
that's why I figured it wasn't working. Because I didn't grab it. I just grabbed this quick.
Did you tell her yet?
I gotta wait till tomorrow to see what the meetings, what they're gonna.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot
What they're
about
gonna.
that.
I thought it was just gonna be with my boss, but now it's with the lady from HR.
Who's that?
Joanne? Is it Joanne Miller or something? Joanne. Joanna. Oh, maybe she's from admissions.
Is that where you're gonna be working? Is it?
No, I'm gonna be over dialysis, but she needs me to help her with reports for CPI and reporting to the state and stuff. So, I don't know.
Is that recording?
As far as I know. Is it up?
Are you recording this? Are we recording this? It's live? And your call meeting order, right?
I think so, yeah.
They have to turn their mics on.
Evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Public comment for proposed local law 1 of 2023.
We don't do the pledge till later.
Vote of
Yeah.
ethics.
till the next one.
It's when you first come in.
Oh, I thought that was just to sign in.
That's for public hearing and for the town meeting. Pardon?
So we can just go up.
Mm-hmm.
So, my concerns and my,
Talk right into it, Karen, so that it picks you up.
how's that?
We're doing
Thank
that.
you.
What?
First of all,
Just say 3 minutes. That's all.
I want to thank the board for coming up with a code of ethics for elected officials, which many of us appreciate that you're, codifying this. There was one section of the law that I had a major concern, and that was section 4, that says the town board has considered the provisions of Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law, SCORA, and the regulations adopted thereunder at 6 NYCRR Part 617, and finds the proposed amendments to the zoning code will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts. Therefore, no further review is required under SCORA. Now, at the most recent August board meeting, I did ask questions about that late addition to the agenda, and the town lawyer at the time, Kathleen Bennett, said, quote, the existing handbook, the ethics handbook, wasn't as complete as I wanted it to be. That was her answer to me. But I was still very confused by the wording of section 4, especially what is 6 NYCRR Part 617, what proposed amendments have been made to the zoning code, followed by the statement, and no further review of what is required under SCORA. Why is there a reference to environmental law in a local law that has nothing to do with a project of any kind in need of an environmental review? It was clearly presented at the August board meeting as a law related to nothing but ethics. Yet when I went to the DEC's website on my own, what I found was 6 NYCRR refers to Part 617 of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, references adopted amendments to the seeker regulations to intend to streamline and improve the seeker process. The department expects to amend Part 617 to add a new Type 2 category for approvals granted by the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which would implement the statutory exclusion for ORA's approval in ECL Article 8. In addition, the department expects to also make minor changes to the text of Part 617 and 617 Part 2O, Appendixes A and B,
Is this
and it
supposed to be?
said, see the Division of Environmental Permits section of the 2023 regulatory agenda for additional details on the anticipated amendments. And they also included contact information for an environmental analyst. So I Googled Division of Environmental Permits section of the 2023 regulatory agenda for additional details, where I landed here, the Division of Environmental Permits. And there it said that 6 NYCRR Part 617 seeker, the department proposes to add approvals of the Office of Renewable Energy Siting to the list of Type 2 category to conform with Environmental Conservation Law Article 8, which within it says this rulemaking requires, among other things, a regulatory impact statement, a regulatory flexibility analysis for small businesses and local governments, and a rural area flexibility analysis. That seems very important to me, and also quite confusing, because I'm not a lawyer. An ethics law out of the blue, with no real discussion or explanation beyond the town lawyer saying that the town's existing handbook wasn't as complete as she wanted it to be, just doesn't answer the biggest question of all, which is, does this proposed local ethics law in any way impact or relate to the request by Borrego Wind to site 2 640-foot wind turbines and the still incomplete seeker begun last fall regarding those turbines? Does it relate generally in any way to the town's permitting and siting process? If any town board member is unable to answer no to those specific questions, then I implore you to table this vote on this resolution tonight. If any town board member is unable to explain why Section 4 and the SCORA is part of this local law, then I implore you to table the vote tonight until you are certain personally you know what's in it before you sign it.
Within your proposed local law establishing a code of ethics, there's so much to admire. You clearly establish that serving in public office is not about serving oneself. It holds elected officials to very high and admirable standards. Almost in its entirety, your proposed law is laudable and worthwhile. But also within it is a wrinkle, one worth ironing out before you vote. Section 4 should be eliminated entirely. I've heard this section of the law is nothing, it is required language. I do not believe this is accurate. In fact, according to New York State guidance, and I have the document for you, entitled State Environmental Review Act frequently asked questions for local officials. It is only required if the project affects the environment or if it commits the municipality to a definite course of further decisions, such as a municipality's comprehensive plan. And that's on page 10 of the document I'll give you. There's no mention anywhere in the law of a project that involves altering the physical landscape of the town of Shelby. There's no mention anywhere of a specific zoning code change or amendment, at least not in language people understand. There's only this reference to Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law and regulations adopted thereunder at 6 NYCRR Part 617. So why does Section 4 of your law mention an amendment to the zoning and then conclude by saying no review is required because the proposed amendment will not result in any significant adverse environmental impact? Environmental impacts on what? At best, it is bad writing. No small thing at $300 a pop. That's what you guys pay. It's either that or $270. I can't remember if it changed when the new lawyer got hired, but it's really high. You can have high writing standards. At worst, it's legal language that's made it easier for unpopular renewable energy siting, a loophole that would allow some to skip seeker requirements altogether. Can any of the board members answer the questions I have tonight regarding Section 4? Can the town attorney? And if you cannot, then I respectfully ask that you table tonight's vote until you can. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Actually, I'll give you an answer to that.
Can I give you guys a
Yeah,
copy of
sure.
this first?
Yeah. Code of ethics law, the reason we have this code of ethics law, is everyone sitting up at this table, the employee code of ethics does not apply to. This law applies to elected officials and appointed officers. So we have, that's why we have the employee code of ethics, plus we have this code of ethics. So I'm held to these standards. Everyone up here is held to these standards. So the question about Borrego, if I had a project on my property, I can't even be in the room. I have to leave. These guys discuss it. That's the integrity. That's what this code of ethics is. That's why we're doing this. On the seeker, I'm going to let Jeff Allen answer you on that.
Thanks. So I'm Jeff Allen. I'm sitting in tonight for Kathy Bennett, who is the normal town attorney, but oh, I can just okay. But I'm also with the same law firm, and I've been working with the town of Shelby for almost a decade now. In addition to what was just stated, a code of ethics is required by New York State's general municipal law. So that's the other reason this is being put forth. The language in what is proposed, including, and we'll focus on Section 4, obviously, comes from the New York State Comptroller's website. This is not something that I wrote. It is not something my law firm wrote. And I'm not saying that defensively, a little bit defensively, but that's where this comes from. So while there are some towns, even in the area, that do not have this section, those towns, for the most part, have adopted or had adopted codes prior to this, what I'll call an evolution in the law. So you've raised a lot of really good questions. I'm going to try to answer them all, but I hope you feel free to ask me if I miss something. So high level, what is this section for? Section 4 applies to the board members here in the event, and only in the event, there is a proposed amendment to the town zoning law. Proposed. Doesn't mean there's something sitting there now. In fact, I'm unaware of anything sitting there now that this is directly applicable to. But if there is a proposed change to the current zoning law, and that change would result pursuant to NYCRR Part 617 and Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law, if that proposed change would result in a significant environmental impact, then the board would need to submit it to seeker for further review. If the board determined that a proposed amendment would not have a significant environmental impact, then they would not need to submit it to the state for further review. In other words, it's giving the board more autonomy.
Well, it's fresh. Why not include the sentence, if there were a proposed change to the current zoning law, that change would result in a significant environmental impact, then the board would need to submit to seeker review. Why do you only have the other side of it of, if it did not, then it would not need seeker review?
Because they're not the same thing.
Right.
Now, well, I'll answer this, because you're actually correct. It would need to go to seeker for review if there would be a proposed, or the proposed amendment would result in a significant environmental impact. That is codified elsewhere. This is a code of, in the seeker code provisions. I don't have the exact code provision in front of me. But this is a code of ethics. This is not the environmental law. The environmental law, the separate body of laws under seeker, they require exactly what you just suggested.
That clarifying statement, though.
Karen, could you speak in the mic so we can know?
Your statement clarifying that is encouraging.
Good. I'm
It
trying
is.
to be.
I like that part. And I understand you can't put all of 617 in a local ethics law because it's more than 100 pages long. However, that one sentence you just said, by including that, it would reassure the public, in my humble opinion, to say that there's one versus the other. That a local law proposed by an actual member, of an elected official, proposing an amendment that would be, if that proposed change to the current zoning law could result in a significant environmental impact, then the board would need to submit to seeker review, including just that sentence, along with what's already there, helps us see that you're not hiding anything. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it's a good point. And
That's what I mean about the writing side. I didn't mean to, say about $300. I'm just jealous.
no, it doesn't go in my pocket. But just to be clear, this wasn't written, the board didn't instruct us, I didn't write. This is literally straight from New York State Comptroller's suggested language.
Do you have that document where we could read it? Because I thought I printed a document from the comptroller that includes suggestions for how to write these laws, and I can't find it. Like a model law, like a link to the comptroller's suggested.
Yeah,
Do you know what
I'd
I
have to
mean?
find, I have the actual document with me, but this is the one I'm using to review. So it is available. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you, I'm sorry, what the exact web URL is.
Yeah.
But it is available at the comptroller's website, and we can
You
try
can
to.
find those things better than I can, I guess is my point. And in terms of clarity, I mean, that's what I rail about every month is clarity and transparency. And again, I just think that this section is valuable and really, really helpful if we can see in writing that sentence about the size of it.
Sure, and I guess that's something that the board will need to consider.
And again, why I don't want you to vote on it tonight, that if there's even a little bit of wiggle room on language, what's wrong with waiting 1 month to clarify and make that statement better? Or eliminate it, just because New York State said you had to use it in the evolution of the law, doesn't mean every town has included it. In fact, some towns, for instance, for their ethics law, included a board of community members to serve as an ethics board, something you could include. There are other ways of looking at this before you just vote. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Well, I mean, there were a number of questions. Should I continue, or?
Were you good, Karen?
I'm good. I'm
You
fine
good?
listening to what
Okay.
Jim thinks.
So, talking to the microphone.
Yeah, I will in a second here.
The
Get my
transcripts.
thoughts here together. I guess still at the end of the day, I don't understand why section 4, and again, I think that an ethics policy is certainly long overdue. Again, I applaud you guys for proposing this and pursuing it. I read through it and it makes a lot of sense, and I again, thank you for taking the time to put something together. I don't see the value of section 4, and in your answers, I still don't understand how a change to the process of seeker or the proposed, proposal to change the zoning has anything to do with the rest of the ethics question. And certainly we look for clarification on that. I don't see, to me, that's a separate entity and a separate discussion, whether it takes in another hearing, a public hearing, to better understand. One of the things that makes me a little uncomfortable, and move on and even into your wording of what this section 4 is describing, is that the board can, without really any input, make changes to the zoning that would have an impact to seeker. They could change zoning. It could change the way the seeker process is viewed. Am I incorrect on that statement? It doesn't need to be voted on. The board can just make up, this board could sit there and say, from now on, we're going to have a change to the zoning law that less acreage is involved in a particular design than it currently is spelled out in the zoning. Is that correct? They could just go ahead and do that?
No.
What will stop that?
Well, again, there are a couple of things that we're conflating. One is, can the board make changes to the zoning code? Set aside the seeker, set aside the code of ethics. Can they do that? Yes, they can. There's a process by which there would be a proposed amendment to the zoning code, and then ultimately a vote. And then if the vote is yay, and there's a change to the zoning code, then that would be implemented. The only time that this code of ethics with this section 4 would come into play is if that proposed amendment would have a significant impact on the environment.
And who makes that determination?
Seeker. Under seeker there are, and as Karen I think mentioned, the law, the seeker code provisions are voluminous.
I know.
There are, and I think we all can appreciate that. You know, so if there is a determination, now to answer your question, who makes that determination?
Right.
Well, again, the board is trying to act ethically. They're trying to, and this provision is intended to assure the public, you, in my town, me, that my town board is doing the right thing ethically. And what that means in this provision is that if this proposed amendment would not have significant impact, then they don't need to report it to seeker. They're not changing seeker.
I know that, I understand that, but they're changing some of the basis for pursuing a seeker process.
This is really, that doesn't change how seeker is applied. What
No,
it does is it gives the town, the voters in this town
voters in this town.
The ability to hold this board accountable
Yeah.
for its decisions. So from,
Afterwards.
well,
I mean, these things don't go to public vote.
again, there are two, we're dealing with two issues. Seeker applies no matter what. Whether
Yes,
this is
understood.
in there or not, that applies.
Understood.
Everyone has to live with it. The code of ethics, if adopted, some version does need to be adopted, whether this is in or out. The code of ethics simply says, if these guys do something wrong, then they violated the code of ethics and they can be held accountable for that violation in and of itself. The state's gonna do whatever it's gonna do under seeker.
Some of those things are pretty hard to prove in terms of why a certain decision was made and whether it actually violated any code of ethics. I mean, you see things all the time. I appreciate you trying to do this. I just wish that wasn't in there.
Well, to be clear, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm trying to just answer questions. I don't have
I
a
appreciate
dog
you
in this
trying to put
fight.
together an ethics policy. Again, I already thanked you for it. I appreciate that. I just, in the past, there has been some trouble in terms of trust of the board and lack of transparency. We now are in another board that has promised a lot of transparency with the changes. I see things like this in an ethics policy without a lot of explanations involved. It's not being very transparent, and it makes me doubt the process. Right from the beginning, I go, this thing gets published, there's no detail anywhere, and without you here explaining some of it, any idea, I still don't have a good grasp of why that section is in this. The rest of it makes sense, ethics, okay, it's pretty straightforward. But tying it to the seeker and to zoning changes, I just don't get it. And so if you're gonna vote on it, I'd say table it if you can, take that thing out of there. I feel a lot better about it. And I feel a lot better about the transparency of the board, that they're doing the right thing. We've had a lot of issues. There's a lot of mistrust. I'm sorry. I wish that I didn't have to say that. But some things have happened in the last several years. And you could, reference the lawsuit that was just filed yesterday. A decision made by this board to join the sewer thing. It's not a trustworthy thing that I can feel real thing about. I know a lot of you were not involved in it, some of you were. But when I see this, where's the transparency? Where's the information? There should have been a whole lot more on the table here or on the website explaining why that is in the document. I mean, in all my years on my job, I wouldn't dare put this before a board without more explanation as to what the heck it was, So that's my statement here. I hope you guys table this thing. If there's reason for that to be in there, I'd like to see more explanation as to why.
Again, the seeker laws apply regardless of what you include or don't include in your code of ethics. This code of ethics provision simply allows the board to, here I think is the simplest way I understand it. The environmental regulations in this state and every state are onerous. There is a lot of red tape to deal with. If this board decides to propose an amendment to the zoning code, only an amendment, this is not, and this kind of goes to one of Karen's questions, this is not project-based.
No, it doesn't have to be.
It's not, period.
Right.
It's this code of ethics provision. If there's a proposed amendment in that amendment, in the opinion of the board, I'll talk about that in 1 second, okay? Because I see the suspicion on your face. Rightfully so. If there's a proposed amendment to the zoning code, and only a proposed amendment to the wording of the zoning code as codified, either they're adding words or taking words out, and that proposed amendment, if it has any impact at all on the environment, and there are zoning code provisions that don't really impact the environment under seeker.
Right.
So if there is a proposed amendment and it has, in the opinion of this board, a significant environmental impact, a possible significant. Well, then this board says, look, ethically, we need to present this to seeker for further review. All right, we'll let them decide. We're not deciding. If this board concludes that this proposed amendment to the zoning code, and again, this could be a zoning code change that doesn't have an environmental bent, or if it does, it's not a significant environmental impact, then this board can say, ethically, we have determined that this will not have a significant environmental impact. One of the ways they will determine, and this is how this plays out in practice, they will ask for, I'll give you 2 examples, an engineering report. All right, so they engage an outside engineering company or utilize the expertise that they have available here. And there's a written report that says, doing X will not cause a significant environmental impact, and here's the evidence for that, and here's the rationale. And the board takes that, or they get a legal opinion if it happens to be a legal matter, or they get both. And they look at that and they say, look, the lawyer, the engineers, the architects, they all said that this proposed amended change, remember, proposed, it's not a change, right, yet. This will not have a significant environmental impact. What that allows the board to do, if they determine, based on the evidence and reports that they have, that this proposed change will not have a significant environmental impact, they do not need to report it to seeker. What that allows the town to do is cut through some of the red tape.
Gotcha.
That's what it allows. And only in the event they determine there is no significant. Now let's say they make that determination and you're suspicious of it.
Absolutely.
Sure. Now, let's say there are red flags all over. I can't even make up an example, but let's say everyone decides, yeah, they're all going to start, opening 7-Elevens on their property, and there are 20 of them in a row. It happens to be every member of the board. Okay, we can all see that there's a problem there. And they determined that, well, we amended the code to allow us to do this, and we didn't see a significant environmental impact.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's nonsensical, and that would be, in addition to a violation of many other things, it also would be a violation of code of ethics. I'll tell you at that point, that's probably the least of their concerns.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that part of what you're talking about. That's an extreme example.
Sure.
There are much more subtle, of course, changes that could occur that could significantly impact the seeker process that might not seem on the surface to be all that big a deal to anybody. But the board could make a decision, a change that definitely makes even a current. I know it isn't aimed at that, I'm not saying that it is, but a change could occur that would allow a particular, or any future project to move forward without a lot of red tape that you're trying to avoid in the seeker process. Subtle wording changes to the zoning could make a huge difference in the seeker process in terms of removing environmental concerns and having the board make the decision. There's nothing in here that I understand makes them review this with an engineering company. There's nothing in any kind of proposed change to the zoning that they have to talk to anybody. The board can do it themselves. Is that not correct? They can
Partially, but that, again, we're talking about 2 different things. The code of ethics doesn't dictate how the board changes zoning.
I understand it.
It just says, if they do.
I'm in particular concerned about that section. I'm not concerned about the rest of the ethics policy. I think, again, it's good. I'm concerned about what possible impact it could have on the seeker process going forward. It was already contentious. It is possible to make some subtle changes someplace to the zoning that will make it even more contentious without anybody really recognizing it. And that's my concern. It really needs to be thought out, talked about a lot differently. And in my opinion, and you guys make the votes. All I can do is vote in November. But at the end of the day, you guys have to look at this and say, does that belong in there? Could it be an adjunct, it should be a separate hearing. I'd like to understand more about what kind of restrictions the board has in terms of making changes to the zoning. It's transparent. I'd like to know. And that could be a separate entity and talked about separately and voted on separately. And that's my opinion. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. I just want to make one thing clear. I was asked to come to answer questions and give my best explanation. This is complicated. There's no doubt. I'm not here to sell anything at all. I mean, this is up to you, and this is your town and what you want to do. And I can appreciate it. There are a lot of questions everywhere about this and many other provisions. So this provision, I believe, is particularly confusing because it seems out of place.
It does.
And I can appreciate that. I certainly can. So one of the things I think about when I look at this is, what if it's not there? You know, sometimes the best way, and for me, my simple mind to evaluate something is, okay, we have a bunch of questions with it in there. What if it's not there? Does anything change? And the answer is, I don't think so. If it's not in there, remember, the only thing this thing says is a negative, as Karen pointed out. It doesn't say you have to do this if you find a significant environmental impact. It says you don't have to do this if you don't find it.
If you don't feel that it is.
Well, you could read it that way, I suppose.
Absolutely. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying. I really do. I just feel it needs a lot more explanation. If it needs to be part of this, I'd like it to go back and be reworded, thought out. I'd like to see some teeth in it in terms of how these changes get proposed. And then, you know, where's the ethical issue that's related to any kind of zoning change that impacts seeker? It's just not clear in this at all. And when I first read this, it reminds me of what the federal government does and what the state government does when there's members of Congress or Senate that have a special thing that they want to get through, but they know they're never going to vote it on, so they stick it in the defense bill. And that gets shoved through, and all of a sudden it becomes law, and nobody even saw it. This almost smelled to me like that's what was going on. If there is a true reason for it to be in there, and it has an impact that I, and I'm sure others, could feel comfortable with, then why not word it that way and provide the information for the public, not just me, but for the public to see and to feel more comfortable with what is being done. I feel a lot better about it.
Well, I'll say one thing, and I don't want to put out, again, this provision and the way this is written was not something that I or the board came up with. This was taken straight from the comptroller. So I think everyone can appreciate the suspicion or concerns, but at the same time, this isn't a situation where someone was trying to, you know, jam something in there. This is in the comptroller, so the board looked at this and said, okay, let's evaluate this, and that's what we're doing. So I think these questions are very good.
It's unfortunate that this board is somewhat, you know, tarnished by past actions. Not necessarily about pointing the fingers at anybody sitting up there. That's not my point. But
That's why I'm trying to get a code of ethics, so everyone's held
yeah,
accountable.
but I just mean, so
Hey, Karen.
that's where I get the
In
suspicion.
case somebody else wants to speak first. You already had your chance.
That's why I was suspicious, you know, and
I
I'd
want-
like to
I
see
want
better
everyone held
explanation.
accountable.
Yeah.
Did anyone else have a comment before Karen speaks in? Questions? Okay, Karen.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Jeff, for listening. I have something conciliatory to offer, which is that I really appreciate what you're saying. When you clarify the law, I did find it very helpful. When I suggested tabling the vote and looking at it, and I suggested possibly eliminating it, after what Jeff said, I could see the value of part of this. One specific change you could make that would make it maybe more palpable to some of us
would be that in section 4 after 617, and I'll give you this, Jeff, so you have a copy, a comma, and then the regulations adopted there under at 6 NYCRR part 617, comma, a supermajority, meaning 4 of 5 members, comma, and finds that, comma, with the evidence they've been provided that the proposed amendments to the zoning code will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts, therefore no further review. It gives you more standing to say, we're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes because we know it's so serious to make any kind of change to our zoning and kind of smooth the way with seeker. 4 out of 5 voting members. You're saying there are times when maybe it's worth our time to say we really need to have almost all of us, if not even more, a full, unanimous vote. So you know what I'm saying? That I think that would offer something that acknowledged that perspective. Anyway, thank you again for the public hearing and listening.
Okay, anyone else have any other questions? Comment? By show of hands, how many people want that secret paragraph out of it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well, how about voting on changing it?
Yeah.
Or tabling
Yeah,
it?
so,
Can you vote on, can you take a
I'm
hand
just doing
vote?
I'm just doing
I know,
a
can you
poll.
do a hand vote on how many want to just table it for,
I am
month?
going to table.
what?
I'll either, we're not gonna vote on that tonight, I'll table it, and I'll either call another meeting, or we'll, at next month's meeting, just depending on when we can get together next. If we add some type of statement to that, how many people would be all right with that? If we say we have to have.
Depending on the state.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not, nothing, I know it is.
Something along the lines of what she said. Yes,
I
no?
have to see it, yeah.
Yep, me too.
I know, I have to read, we're visual learners.
No, I'm not, I'm just,
I think
taking
it would,
suggestions here.
I think it would go a long ways towards getting a better understanding of what it's doing in this document.
Or anybody else with suggestions too, I mean, not just the supermajority. I mean, if you can think of anything in the next 30 days or so, you can let us know.
I mean, basically what this is for, is like I said, I wanna hold everyone up here accountable. I don't wanna, because we're not bound by the employee handbook. We're not employees of the town of Shelby, we're elected officials. So that's why I want, so we are bound by the code of ethics. So you can come back and say, hey, you violated this. And that, like I said before, the seeker paragraph, that's what the comptroller says should be in there. So, okay. You're gonna add?
I was just gonna say, if we can come up with a little bit different wording, and it still sticks with the state controller's, paragraph, so we're still abiding by the state, that would be all right.
Again, we'd have to see it. But
Oh, yeah, I understand that,
no,
but
if there's
that's what I wanted
if there's
to
a true reason for this thing to be in here, it's got explained
And it's
better.
clarified
And it's
in,
clarified.
in the law.
Yeah.
Like the way Jeff explained it, if there were a proposed change to the current zoning law, and that change would result in a significant environmental impact, then the board would need to submit a seeker review if it did not. Do you know what I mean? Because without that, it's really hard to understand what it
I understand,
references.
but also, as a board member, I want to stay by the state controller's guidelines,
Yes.
okay? So I want to make sure that we're on the same page, doing what you people want, as well as what I, as a board member, and the rest of the board members are going to want. But I do believe that we can probably do this, but I want it to be stayed in with the state guidelines.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got something here that, if you folks have got your paperwork here on proposed local law, turn to section 15. Under section 15, political solicitation. All right, this was put together, this local law was put together. And whether it was inadvertently left out or purposefully left out, this section C isn't in our law, and it should be in there, which reads, political party position. No municipal officer or employee may, while serving as an elected or appointed town employee, be a committee person, chairman, vice chairman, or other officer of any town political party, with the exception of committee persons, as of the date of this policy enactment, who shall be considered grandfathered. Which it means you can't sit on the board and be on the Republican, Democrat, and Independent committee. And that's one thing I felt was left out. It's in the Ridgeways.
What?
It's only in Ridgeway's law. No other town has that in their law.
But
So what's wrong with it?
In New York
Yeah,
State?
it's wrong.
What's,
Yeah, what's wrong with it? Why shouldn't
well,
it,
my opinion
why
is,
shouldn't it be in ours?
if you guys want it in there, we'll put it in there, but it's gonna be effective that date. But why should I tell you you can't volunteer to work someplace?
But if
No,
you just
if I'm
said
on
that
the board,
before you
Karen.
didn't want to change section 4 unless it was in line with New York State comptroller's suggestions, I'm
That's-
guessing John.
That paragraph is not on comptroller's site. It's not on the law. That's something
It's
Ridgeway
no
added
other,
to their law.
no other town in New York State
Not
has that?
locally, no. I just came from a supervisor's meeting. Ridgeway's the only
For the
one
whole
that has it.
state?
Locally, I said.
Oh, I thought you said in the state.
And I believe that Ridgeway has it in their policy because they had some problems. And this is the way they dealt with their problems. And this, therefore, they won't have the problems again.
Okay, my thought on that is, this is the town of Shelby, not the town of Ridgeway. We should be fending for ourselves, not worrying about what the other towns are doing. That's just my thought.
Spoken by somebody that's on Republican committee. So there you go.
Yeah, but he'd be grandfathered in under your
Exactly.
situation.
Exactly.
Would not have been-
As would Dale, as would the,
CJ.
yeah, as Darlene would be in the first.
You gotta go
Yes.
sit, yeah.
You two were on there for 4 years.
And what did I say in the meeting, Dale?
You left.
I left, and I asked the question before I left. Who else would step down?
Okay.
Steve said he would step down. You said you would step down from the Republican committee, if I'm not correct. You were the first one that stood up, or said you would.
There's more to the story. There's no sense getting into it.
All right, that's good for now. We have a question.
Well, back when
Name?
Alana Konetsky, I had approached the board to be a candidate for, being a board member. And I went in front of the Republican committee. I felt it very, I don't know, I'm just nervous right now. There was just too many board members on that public, or on that Republican committee, and it just seemed like a conflict of interest. Maybe it's done that way, but I thought, it just felt weird to me to be on there and to see board members on the Republican committee. To me, that should be a separate entity, and not, and maybe, I don't know if you just have one from the board member, but I think that needs to be changed, and I think that's what he's trying to say. There's just, and I know it's a small town, and there's not enough people to stand up and come and be forward and be part of this. But it just seemed, relatives and this stuff, and my first question was asked of me when I went in front of the board, do you have any members, family members or whatever, on any of the committees? And that should, you shouldn't have family committees or family members that's still a conflict of interest. But that's what John's saying, I think should be done.
I do too. Let's change that.
Okay, anyone else got anything else? Last chance, last call? Anything else? All right, we'll either schedule a meeting before the next town board meeting to go over this again, of another public meeting, or a next town board meeting. I'll make sure we notify you. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, okay. We're in 5 minutes, I gotta set up the cameras, if you guys need to use the restroom or take a break.
That wasn't on YouTube?
This wasn't on YouTube?
The public hearing wasn't on?
Yes. It has to be two separate ones, so.
Oh.